What's up, guys? In today's video, we're going to do a full tour of my studio. All the gear, all the speakers, everything I use. Let's get into it. So the first part to talk about in my room is the actual room itself, which I think is the most important part over the speakers, the gear, all of that. My room was designed by John Brandon. He's an acoustician. He can take whatever dimensions you have and build a room that is really flat. Like my room is perfect almost. It's plus or minus 5 dB in a few frequencies, but it's overall really flat if you look at the frequency response here. And the fact that this whole studio is built in a garage is pretty mind-blowing that we were able to make a room sound so flat with dimensions that were already set up. We couldn't change anything about it. Now, believe it or not, the front wall where the speakers are is actually about 6 feet deep with insulation. It is a huge bass trap, and then in the back walls, there's 4 foot deep bass traps as well. The cloud above my head really pulls the room all together. It makes it look really cool, but also is good for reflecting frequencies up there as well. Next are my speakers. I use Key 3 speakers. These things sound phenomenal. I spent a lot of money and did a lot of mixes to get to them, but you know, out of all the speakers I've used in my 20 years in the business, these things just sound amazing. They translate so well, like everything I mix on them, I know is just going to sound good everywhere else, especially headphones. And that's what's like really cool about these speakers is they translate on, you know, cars, headphones, whatever. The way they're built, they have 4 subs altogether. They have 2 on the sides and 2 on the back. And it does this cardioid bass pattern thing where it doesn't, like the room isn't affected by the bass much, and the bass is directional just to the listening spot. So you don't have that many issues with bass in your room, or at least not as many as you would with a normal speaker. So that is one of the keys, no pun intended, to those speakers sounding so good. The keys are mounted on these amazing northward speaker stands that just isolate them from the room like no other stand can. I have 2 other pairs of speakers, set of focals behind me here. And then in the back of my room, I recently set up these Kali audio speakers I had, and I use those towards the end of a mix. I can go in the back of the room. There's no screens or anything there, just 2 speakers, and I sit down and just listen through the mix. And I can't express what a great addition that's been. There's something about getting away from the screen when you're listening to a song that you just hear things, to me at least, clearer, and a lot of things pop out. So when I'm close to her, I feel like I'm done with the mix. I go back there, I listen to the mix, and 3 or 4 things will pop out that I wasn't necessarily hearing in front of the screen, and I can go and adjust and fix. And a lot of times that's emotional stuff that can really make the song sound magical as opposed to just sounding better from the mix. So all these speakers are going through my monitoring system, which is on a Trinnov Demon. Now the Trinnov Demon is an amazing room correction device, and it is also a monitor controller, and to me, the best monitor controller, because it can accept digital and analog. It can output digital and analog. And for a situation like mine, where the keys are actually digital AES inputs, and then I have, you know, the Kalis and the focals, which are analog inputs, it works all together very well. There has been some points since I got the key speakers that I'm like, I don't think I need this Trinnov anymore, because the room correction that I'm doing on the keys is so minimal, like a couple dB, if that. So when I bypass the Trinnov with the keys, you don't really hear much of a difference because the keys just sound so good in this room. But it definitely helps with the Kali and the focal speakers. And then, like I said, the monitoring of the Trinnov is like just top rate. Next is what's on my actual desk. Now, if you've followed my channel long enough, you know I am a sucker for control surfaces. I've tried all of them. I've bought and sold them. As a Pro Tools user, I've finally come to the realization that the Yukon stuff they make is the best for Pro Tools. So on my desk, I have this Avid dock, which I just love. There's so much you can do with that thing. You can use any of the effects like EQ, reverbs. You can change it with the knobs. You can use it as a fader, has transport on it. And now the latest SoundFlow works with Yukon. So on all the buttons, I now have SoundFlow shortcuts as far as, you know, like opening my metric AB for listening to the rough mix, stuff like that. I can actually use a lot of the buttons I wasn't even using as SoundFlow actions, which has been super helpful. Next to that's the Avid S1, which I like to use just for faders and stuff. It's cool when I'm mixing drums just to be able to grab a couple different drums and turn them up or down. I would actually like to have 16, but that's just overkill and my desk isn't big enough for it. So 8 it is. And next to that is my Rock Solid Audio Micro 4K. Now, if you haven't seen any of my reviews on it, make sure to check it out. But that's one of my favorite controllers, and it's just a mouse controller in Pro Tools. And other DAWs, it works with a wrapper, and it's much more streamlined, but I like it as the mouse controller in Pro Tools. And I have all my plugins set up to that. I can really reach for it. My SSLs, even reverbs. I have my reverbs, so the low cut and the high cuts, like the mix and the pre-delay and the decay and stuff like that. And then lastly is my Stream Deck, which is all my SoundFlow stuff. I just got the new one here, which adds the ability to use the knobs, which SoundFlow is starting to implement and making some really cool things like turning clips up and down just with a knob, which is fun. So next we'll talk about my converters. I use an Aurora N by Lynx Studio, Lynx Audio. And it's just the best sounding converter to me. It's just so transparent. You barely notice it's there. And I got 16IO analog for, using all of my analog gear, and then 16IO of AES. And a lot of that's to talk to the Trinnov and then my key speakers and stuff like that. It's just a great box. It's so reliable. It always turns on. There's never an issue. Like I've had issues with other audio interfaces, even the high-end ones. And this thing's just always rock solid. It's the Thunderbolt model. And I can't say enough good things about that converter. Okay, so let's move on to the analog gear. I have 2 racks. I have one to my left and one to my right when I'm sitting down. The left rack is like my boutique, really cool boxes that I still love and I can't replicate in the box. And then to my right is my Better Maker kind of mastering chain and all my Better Maker gear. On the left side, the first box is my Avalon 747, and this thing is killer for warming up thin sounding masters. I'll use it in mastering sometimes, and then on vocals I use it a ton as well. I just reviewed the plugin. If you want to check it out, I'll put the link up above. And the plugin sounds great, but that thing just still has something that the plugin doesn't quite have. And I love that box. It's always sounded great on vocals, has that super silky high end that doesn't get harsh. Below that is the Weight Tank by Locomotive Audio. This is a newer company, and they're making some fantastic stuff. This thing's like a Verimute compressor, and it's got some like weight to it. It adds weight by the Weight Tank, and it has this really cool option between switching from round or drive, and round is obviously a bit rounder sounding, warmer, and then the drive switch gives you a little bit more distortion, and you can drive it a bit more. I like to use this thing on bass a lot, and then sometimes on vocals as well, but a really cool character piece. The next unit is the TubeTech HLT2AM. This is a beautiful mastering EQ, and that's what I tend to use it for, or on my mix bus or on vocals. It sounds great on all of those things. It has a high shelf and a low shelf, and then it has something that you don't see too much in the analog world, which is a T filter, which is a tilt filter. And that thing is amazing. You can really shape anything with that box. It's more broad stroke stuff, but I can use just that box just for mastering and get a really great master out of it. It's just got like, it's not too warm, but it has a warmth to it, and just adds a little bit of expensiveness, I guess is the best way for me to say it, to anything you put through it. The next unit is the Hendy Amps Polak. Now, I'll be completely transparent. I just loved the way this thing looked, and then I started to hear some examples of what it sounded like, and it is a optical compressor, and it has just so many different vibes you can get with it. Now, you can use it a lot for mastering, which I do. If it's like an organic kind of song, it works really well for that, in my opinion. But it also works great for vocal buses. I use it on my vocal bus sometimes, or on a few other instruments, but mostly vocals and master bus for that. But it has this color section, and it has this style section, and they all do different things. So make sure to look into it if it's something you are interested in. Okay, the next piece of gear is something I wanted for years, and it is the latest piece I just got. I waited months for it to get delivered. And it's probably the last piece of analog gear I think I might get. I like what I have, and more so I'm mixing completely in the box anyway, but it's nice to have a few pieces to play with from time to time and that still get a vibe that I can't always get in the box. And this piece definitely delivers on that. This is the Silver Bullet by Louder and Liftoff. It has so many options on it. I just did a video on it actually comparing their new plugin that Plugin Alliance released and the hardware unit. And while they're really close, the analog still has something to it that the digital doesn't quite offer, but it is close. I was actually a little bummed when the plugin came out, because I kind of felt like I had this like magical thing that no one else really had. But this thing's great for running through mixes. It's great on drums. It's great on bass. It's great on vocals. Anything that just needs some energy and a little bit of warmth or a little bit of grit, you can run through this thing, and it is a silver bullet. Like, the title of that unit is definitely well deserved, and I just can't say enough great things about this unit here. Okay, so next we're moving on to the right rack, which is my Better Maker rack. And so I have all the mastering chain plus the Pultec EQ. The Pultec EQ I can use on mixes or vocals or drums, but I also have the Pultec EQ by Better Maker on the mastering equalizer as well. So I can use two of them on different things if I need to. A lot of time the mastering one is obviously on my final master or the mix bus. And then I have the mastering compressor on there, which is a super versatile compressor. And I use it more than just on mastering. A lot of times I use it on drums. I've used it on vocals a few times with the DBX 160 option of it. It has, 3 different compressors you can pick from. Check out my review on the mastering compressor if you're interested. And then finally, the mastering limiter, which I've loved for years. I've had it for a long time. I don't use it as much as I used to. There's some really good clippers in the box that if I need it, I can use. But it has served me well and been on a ton of masters over the years. So all the Better Maker stuff is great and something I do use quite often in here still. Lastly are the Sing speakers, which I use for Dolby Atmos mixing and for my own entertainment. That's in my entertainment room in my house, and I can go in there and plug my laptop right into it and do an Atmos mix, or I can have, which is plugged in right now, is the TV, and watch movies in full Dolby Atmos. They're an amazing set of speakers. You can do 4 of them and have 7.1. If you get one more, you can put it up on the ceiling and do 4, 7.1 at 4. So I do have 7.1 in there, which is, I think, more than enough for me to get a good idea how the Atmos mix will translate in the room. Normally with Dolby stuff, we're just making sure it sounds good on the headphones, and, having that set up to go check on speakers is definitely helpful. So that is the final studio tour. Let me know if you guys have any comments about my room or any of the gear in the comments below. If you do want to get your song mixed or mastered in this room, hit me up at mixandmastermysong.com. Talk to you soon.